The next numeration system we'll look at is the Roman numeration system. And this one is actually still used a little bit today. It's mostly decorative. So like you might see the cornerstone on a building shows Roman numerals to represent the date in which the building was built. You might see it on like a decorative clock, or sometimes you might see it. I've seen outlines for papers where they use like a Roman numeral system to number the sections or the chapters of a paper. So the Roman system, it uses the subtraction principle as well as the addition principle. And that's what can make it sometimes a little bit tricky. And if you know the correct way to do Roman numerals, you'll actually notice that a lot of things like decorative clocks actually don't have correct numerals because they're not correctly applying this subtraction principle. And I don't know if that's just a mistake or if they think it's prettier that way, but you will actually find some examples where they're not done correctly. So we would still go left to right, just like with the Egyptian system. So starting from the left, we add each numeral unless its value is smaller than the value of the numeral to its right. So in that case, we would subtract its value. So this is very much like the Egyptian system, and there's sometimes that you will never do subtraction. It just depends on what your numbers are. But there are some cases where you're actually subtracting the value of the number. So only the numbers 1, 10, 100, and 1,000 can be subtracted, and they can only be subtracted from the next two higher numbers. So that means you could subtract 1, but you could only subtract it from the next symbol up is a V, which is 5, or from the X, which is 10, right? So you could only subtract 1 from either 5 or 10. So that basically means that the number 4 would involve subtraction, and the number 9 would involve subtraction, right? You can subtract the number 10, but you can only subtract it from the next two after that. So that would be L, which is 50, or C, which is 100. So that means that we could subtract 10 from 50. So that means the number 40 would involve subtraction, and the number 90, right? 10 taken from 100. And then you can also subtract 100. And so, but again, that can only be subtracted from the next two. So that would be from 500 or 1,000. So if we take 500 minus 100, that would be 400. And if we take 1,000 minus 100, that would be 900. So basically, it's an additive system unless it's one of these 6 numbers. Now, that being said, you could have more than one of these. So like, for example, if you had the number, let's say 490, right? Then that one actually uses 2 of these. So you would actually be using the subtraction principle twice. The best way to do this is just to practice it over and over and over again, and you will get this, right? So here's these 6 numbers that I mentioned, right? And then the symbols for those. So basically, if we just kind of start counting, right? So in Roman numerals, this would be the number 1. So it's just an I, or basically a tally. And then the number 2, you would just add another 1 to that. So that's the number 2. And then the number 3, you would add another 1 to that, right? So there's the number 3. But then when you get to the number 4, we never do more than 3 of the same symbol. So I will see this correctly on decorative clocks where they'll actually do 4 eyes. That's not correct. So we never do 4 of the same symbol in a row in Roman numerals. So if you catch yourself doing that, you know, hey, wait a second, this is one of those weird ones where I have to subtract. So instead of thinking of 4 as 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, we're going to think of it as subtracting 1 from 5. So when you do that, you would put the one you're subtracting first. So we're subtracting 1 from 5. So 4 would be IV. So then the number 5 we know is just a V. And then the number 6 would be, we would start adding again, right? So I would add an I after that. So V is 5, and then another I added to that is 5 plus 1, which is 6, right? So basically the smaller symbol coming before the bigger symbol means you're subtracting. If the smaller symbol comes after the bigger symbol, then you're adding, right? So since I is a smaller number than V, 1 is smaller than 5, if you put the 1 in front of the 5, that means to subtract 1 from 5. But if you put the 1 after the 5, that means to add. So then you would do, so that's 6, then 7 would be, add another one, so it'd be 5 plus 1 plus 1. 8 would be 5 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. And then we get to 9, and we're tempted again to just add another 1. But again, you never want more than 3 consecutive symbols. So by the time you get to 9, you would think of that as 1 less than 10. So that would be IX. And then you keep going from there. So 10 would be X. 11 would be XI, 12 would be XII, 13's XIII, 14, again, I can't have 4 of the same symbols in a row, so 14, we would think of that as 10 plus 4, right? So 10 is an X, and 4, if you remember, was IV. So that's how we would write fort. So I encourage you to maybe do this like for the first 100 numbers even, just keep going. So we would do like XV, XVI, XVII, XVIII, and just keep going. And then you'll get some practice with these. And so you can also look at your number that you're translating. So in this case, we have the number 249. You can look for these 6 numbers there. So like this is, you could think of this as 200 plus 40 plus 9. So 200 is not one of those 6 numbers, so I'm not going to have to do subtraction for that. So I would just add. 100 is C, and so for 200, that means I would just do 2 C's. 40, is 40 one of these 6 numbers we subtract? Absolutely it is, right? So 40 is, we think of that as 10 less than 50, which is XL. And then is 9 one of those 6 numbers? Yes, it is. We think of 9 as 1 less than 10, so IX. So this is the correct way to write 249. It's CCXLIX. All right, and then we're going to go the other direction too. So if we're looking at a number that's in Roman numerals, we want to change this into our number system. So this can be a little bit tougher because you have to decide like which letters go together. But what I would look at is I would look at, are the numbers, are they going down in value? As soon as they start going up in value, you know you're going to do some subtraction. So like notice that this starts with an M. M we know represents 1,000, right? Next it goes to a C, which represents 100, so that's good. We're headed down in value. Then it goes to an M, and M is 1,000, so all of a sudden it's going back up in value. So when you see it go back up in value, that means you're doing some subtraction. So that actually means that these two, the C and the M, go together. So we've got M, and then the C and the M are going to go together. And then if we look at the next symbol, it's an X, right, which represents 10. So that's good. It's going down in value. But then all of a sudden it goes back up to C, right? So when it goes back up, that tells you that the one before it is part of it, right? So X and C are together. So far I've got the M is by itself, CM is by itself, XC is by itself. And then V is 5 and I is 1, and that's going down in value. So that means I can think of those separately. So I can think of this separate as M is really 1,000. CM, since those two we said are together, that's really saying 100 less than 500, right? I'm sorry, 100 less than 1,000, I mean. So that one's 900. And then XC, we said those two are together. That's really 10 less than 100, which is 90. And then V and I are actually, you can think of them separate if you'd like. V is 5 and I is 1. And so then you would just add all this up. So you should get 1,996. So like if you saw MC, MX, CVI on the side of a building, that means that building was built in 1996. All right, and then let's look at one more. So what if you notice these symbols, they only go up to 1,000, right? So what if your numbers go beyond 1,000? So what you would actually do is you would start putting a bar on your numbers. So for example, this one is 12,345. So I know that 1,000 is M, but remember, we don't do more than 3 consecutive of the same symbol. So you're not going to do like 12 M's, right? That's way too many. So instead of doing that, what we're going to do is we are going to just do the number 12, and then we're going to put a bar on it. And every bar that you put over it means that you're going to multiply it by 1,000, right? And that's listed here. It says a bar above a symbol or group of symbols indicates that the symbol or symbols are to be multiplied by 1,000. So that means if it was going to get even bigger and you're going to multiply it by 1,000 again, then you would put 2 bars over it, right? So the number 12, that is 10 plus 2, and then I'm just going to put a bar over that to indicate that that is times 1,000. So 12 times 1,000 is 12,000. And then 300, well, 100 is C, so that would be 3 C's. 40 is one of those special ones, right? So remember, 40 is a subtraction one. So that really we're thinking of as 10 less than 50. So 10 and then 50. If I did LX, that would be 60. That would be 50 plus 10. But if I do the 10 first, that means I'm subtracting. And then 5 is V. So this is XII with a bar, and then the rest does not have a bar. It's CCC XLV. So practice this some more. Come up with more examples, especially examples that use some of these 6 numbers, and go do some practice changing our numbers into Roman numerals, and then also changing Roman numerals back to our system.